Sam Rivera had learned three important things during his first month on Kepler 442b. The coffee synthesizer was temperamental, the local star produced spectacular auroras, and thinking too loudly near Zyphara was apparently noticeable. The research outpost sat on a plateau overlooking valleys filled with crystalline vegetation that sang in the wind, literally sang, producing harmonics that made recording equipment malfunction. Sam was here to catalog xenobotanical specimens. Zyphara was here to do the same, but from an Ethelian perspective that involved a lot more biochemical sensing and a lot less equipment. She was remarkable to watch work. Not in a romantic way, Sam kept telling himself, but in the way a physicist might admire an elegant equation. Ethelians were humanoid enough that human and Ethelian could work side by side without constant confusion, but different enough that every movement Zyphara made was a reminder that evolution had taken wildly different paths. Her ears were the most obvious difference, long, gracefully curved, capable of independent movement that served both auditory and emotional expression purposes. But it was the bioluminescent patterns that truly fascinated Sam. They flowed across her skin in response to her emotional state, creating a visual language he'd spent weeks trying to decode. Right now, in the laboratory section of the outpost, Zyphara was reaching for a sample container on the top shelf, and Sam found himself watching the way her skeletal structure allowed for fluid movement that seemed almost boneless. The patterns on her exposed arms shifted to focused green concentration, he'd learned, while maintaining a baseline of calm blue. The efficiency of it all struck him. Every aspect of Ethelian biology seemed optimized for purpose. The elongated spine that allowed for greater flexibility. The distributed muscle fiber that made movements appear effortless. The way the bioluminescent cells integrated with the nervous system to create real-time emotional feedback. Sam was lost in these observations, mentally composing the research paper he'd probably never write about Ethelian biomechanics, when he realized Zyphara had turned around and was looking directly at him. Her patterns had shifted to something he hadn't seen before, a mix of amber and soft pink with traces of that curious green. Her head tilted in the characteristic Ethelian expression of curiosity, and her ears swiveled forward with clear focus. "So you like my body?" The question hit Sam like a physical impact. His brain short-circuited somewhere between horror at being caught staring and panic about what she must think he was doing. What? No. I mean yes but not. He was definitely making this worse. It's not what you think. Zyphara's patterns shifted to something that included flecks of silver, amusement. He'd learned that one early. Her ears did a little flutter that he'd come to recognize as the Ethelian equivalent of suppressed laughter. "What do I think, Sam?" "That I was." He gestured helplessly. "You know, being inappropriate, staring at you in an unprofessional way." "That were you?" Sam took a breath, forcing his brain back into scientist mode. "I was observing, scientifically, the way your skeletal structure allows for that range of motion. The synchronization between your bioluminescent patterns and your physical actions. The efficiency of your muscular system. It's fascinating from a xenobiology perspective, and I got caught up in analyzing it. And I realize that sounds like a terrible excuse, but it's actually the truth." He was definitely rambling. Sam forced himself to stop talking before he said something even more awkward. Zyphara moved closer, her patterns shifting through several colors too quickly for him to interpret. Her ears remained forward, attention, interest, but not aggression. "Your species finds physical observation uncomfortable," she said. "Not a question, an observation. When it's directed at specific individuals, yes. It implies romantic or sexual interest, which can create uncomfortable social situations if that interest isn't mutual." Interesting. Zyphara's patterns settled into deep purple contemplation. "My people view the body differently. It is not separate from the self, it is expression. To observe another Ethelian's form is to read their emotional state, their intentions, their truth. We consider it honest communication. Sam felt his scientific curiosity overriding his embarrassment. So when you noticed me watching you, you weren't offended. I was curious about your perspective. Your species interprets physical form through different frameworks than mine. Her patterns shifted to warm gold, openness, invitation to dialogue. Tell me, when you observe my body, what do you see? This was either a diplomatic disaster in the making or an unprecedented opportunity for cross-cultural understanding. Possibly both. I see evolutionary optimization, Sam said carefully. Your species developed in a different environment than humans, lower gravity, different atmospheric composition. Your skeletal structure is lighter but more flexible. Your muscle fiber distribution allows for sustained effort without the fatigue humans experience. The bioluminescent patterns are a communication system that's integrated at a cellular level, which is something humans only achieve with technology. He was warming to the topic now, sliding into lecture mode. And aesthetically, there's a harmony to it all. The way your movements are efficient but also graceful. The way the patterns flow in sync with your actions. It's like watching a living piece of art that's also a masterclass in biological engineering. Sam stopped, suddenly aware that he'd been talking for several minutes while Zafara watched him with those large eyes that could perceive light spectrums he couldn't imagine. "You're bioluminescing pink," he observed. "I haven't figured out what that means yet." "Warmth," Zafara said softly. "Connection, appreciation." Her ears did that flutter again. No one has described me quite like that before. Most humans who come here are intimidated by ethelians. They find our differences unsettling. Your differences are the interesting part. Yes, her patterns shifted to that curious mix of colors again. I think perhaps your species and mine have much to learn from each other about perspective. You see my body as a scientific marvel. I see yours as a mystery. Humans are pretty standard bipedal primates. We're not particularly special. You endure. Zafara moved to the window overlooking the crystalline valleys. Your species evolved in harsh conditions, competing with predators and elements. Your bodies are built for survival, for persistence. That has its own beauty. Sam joined her at the window, maintaining a respectful distance. The setting sun. This planet had a 27-hour rotation, cast copper light across the singing valleys. So when you asked if I liked your body, you weren't flirting. You were asking about my actual perspective. Your concept of flirting is complex, Zafara observed. From what I understand of human culture, it involves indirect communication and intentional ambiguity. My people are more direct. If I wish to indicate romantic interest, I would simply state it. That must make dating simpler. We do not date. We form bonds through understanding. Physical attraction, as you define it, is secondary to comprehension. Her patterns pulsed with that deep purple again. This is why I asked my question. I wish to understand how you perceive me, not to initiate romance but to achieve clarity. Sam considered this. 3 months working side by side, and they'd barely scratched the surface of truly understanding each other's perspectives. "For what it's worth," he said, "I hope my staring didn't make you uncomfortable. That wasn't my intention." "It did not, it made me curious." Zafara turned to face him fully. "I have a question, Sam Rivera. Would you be willing to teach me how humans perceive physical form? And in return, I will teach you how ethelians communicate through our bodies." "That's actually a fascinating research opportunity." "It is also," Zafara said, her patterns shifting to warm gold again, "a way for us to understand each other better. We have 3 more months in this outpost together. Perhaps we should use that time for more than just cataloging plants." Sam found himself smiling. "Yeah, I'd like that." Outside, the crystalline valleys sang their evening harmonies. Inside the outpost, 2 scientists from different worlds began a conversation that would bridge more than just species. It would bridge the fundamental way they understood existence itself. Zyphara's patterns settled into soft blue with traces of gold. Sam didn't know all the meanings yet, but he recognized contentment when he saw it. "Tomorrow," Zyphara said, "I will show you how Ethelians read emotion through form. And you will explain why humans find certain proportions aesthetically pleasing despite their lack of functional optimization." That's going to be a long conversation. We have time. Her ears swiveled in that way that he was learning meant gentle humor. "And Sam, you may observe me whenever you wish. I find your scientific curiosity flattering." After she left for her quarters, Sam stood at the window for a long time, watching the auroras begin their nightly dance across the alien sky. He'd come to Kepler 442b to study plants. Instead, he was learning that the most fascinating discoveries weren't always the ones you planned for. The morning began with Sam discovering that the coffee synthesizer had finally given up entirely, which Zyphara found unreasonably amusing. Her patterns flickered with silver amusement as she watched him mourn the loss. "Your species' dependency on caffeinated beverages is fascinating," she observed. "Your species' ability to function without coffee is witchcraft," Sam countered, then paused. "Wait, do Ethelians have a concept of witchcraft?" "We have 17 different concepts that translate approximately to your witchcraft, ranging from scientific principles we haven't decoded yet to my neighbor's cooking. Which meaning would you prefer?" Sam blinked. "Did you just make a joke?" Observational humor is a fundamental part of Ethelian communication. "Did you think we were entirely serious?" Her ears did that flutter. "I've been making jokes for 3 months, Sam. You simply didn't recognize them." That's both hilarious and mortifying. They were scheduled for a surface expedition to collect samples from the northern crystalline forests. The journey required a 4-hour trek across terrain that shifted between solid rock and gelatinous biomat, a substance that was either primitive plant life or extremely sophisticated bacteria. The scientific community was still debating. As they walked, Zyphara returned to their previous night's conversation. "You mentioned aesthetic appreciation yesterday. Explain to me why humans value symmetry in physical form." Sam adjusted his sample pack, grateful for a topic that wasn't about him awkwardly staring at his colleague. "It's thought to be an evolutionary indicator of health. Symmetrical features suggest proper development, absence of genetic errors or environmental stress. Our brains are wired to recognize it as desirable for reproductive purposes. But you also value asymmetry in art." "True, we're contradictory like that." Zyphara's patterns shifted to contemplative purple. "Ethelians do not evaluate symmetry the same way. Our patterns are deliberately asymmetric, they flow and change. A perfectly symmetrical Ethelian would appear frozen, unnatural." "Because your communication is tied to visual change," Sam said, the pieces connecting in his mind. "Static symmetry would be like a human with a permanently frozen facial expression." "Exactly." She seemed pleased he'd grasped the concept. "Now watch." Zyphara stopped walking and stood before him. Her patterns began to shift through a sequence. Calm blue, curious green, warm gold, pleased pink, contemplative purple, amused silver, and back to blue. The transitions were fluid, creating a visual rhythm. "This is what we call a pattern introduction," she explained. "When Ethelians meet, we display our emotional range. It establishes communication baseline. You would call it first impression." "That's beautiful," Sam said and meant it. "It's like watching music made visible. Your species uses sound-based music for similar purposes, yes, establishing emotional context and shared experience. We do. Though our music doesn't come from our bodies, we need instruments." "Your voice is an instrument," Zyphara countered. "I've heard you singing while you work. You don't realize you do it." Sam felt his face heat. "I thought I was being quiet." "You were, but Ethelian hearing is more sensitive than human. Also, you have terrible pitch on the chorus of that song about yesterday's problems." Her patterns flickered with silver. "Another joke, Sam." Your pitch is actually quite pleasant. They reached the northern forest as the local sun reached its zenith. The crystalline trees here grew in spirals, their structures refracting light into prismatic displays. Sam had been studying these trees for weeks, but seeing them with Zyphara added new perspective. She moved among them differently than he did, not testing and measuring, but listening and sensing. Her patterns responded to the tree's own bioluminescence, creating a call-and response of light. They're communicating with you, Sam realized. In a sense, they respond to electromagnetic frequencies. My patterns produce similar wavelengths. I'm not certain they're truly sentient, but they're definitely reactive. Sam pulled out his recorder. Can you show me the pattern sequence that gets the strongest response? What followed was 2 hours of the most productive research Sam had conducted since arriving on Kepler 442b. Zyphara would generate different pattern sequences, while Sam measured the tree's responses. They discovered that certain color combinations caused the trees to produce harmonic resonances, while others resulted in bioluminescent blooms. It was during one of these sequences, while Sam was so focused on his readouts that he forgot to watch what he was recording, that Zyphara spoke again. "Sam, you're observing me again." He looked up, startled to realize he'd been watching her interact with the trees rather than his instruments. "Sorry, I got distracted by." "Don't apologize. I'm curious what you were thinking." Sam considered lying, then remembered their agreement about honest communication. "I was thinking about how you move through space. Humans are clumsy. We bump into things, we misjudge distances. You move like you're part of the environment rather than moving through it. Your species moves with purpose and determination. You plant yourselves firmly. There's strength in that. You're being diplomatic. I'm being observant." Zyphara came to sit beside him on a flat rock that hummed with residual energy. "Watch." She held out her arm and her patterns began to shift. But this time, instead of the usual flowing transitions, they moved in sharp bursts, angular, aggressive, discordant. "This is how I perceive human movement," she explained. "Not clumsy, decisive, committed. When humans move, they declare intention. When Ethelians move, we suggest possibility." Sam studied the patterns. "So our movement patterns reflect our communication styles." "Everything reflects everything," Zyphara said. "This is what I'm trying to show you. For Ethelians, there is no separation between body, thought, and expression. We are integrated systems. Your question yesterday about whether I was offended by your observation, that implies a division between body and self that doesn't exist in Ethelian perception. So when I said I found your form fascinating, you heard me saying I found you fascinating. Partially, but I also heard genuine scientific curiosity. Your patterns, yes, humans have patterns too, they're simply not bioluminescent, showed observation without possession. That's rare, Sam. Most beings who observe others do so with intention to possess or control." The weight of that statement settled between them. Sam thought about all the times in human history when observation had been weaponized, when studying others had been the first step to exploiting them. "I don't want to possess or control anything," he said quietly. "I just want to understand." "I know." Zyphara's patterns had gone soft pink again. "That's why I'm teaching you, because you see without wanting to own." They sat in comfortable silence while the crystalline trees sang their afternoon harmonies. Sam pulled out a ration bar, synthesized protein that tasted vaguely like cardboard, and offered half to Zyphara. She accepted it with patterns that flickered confused orange. "You share food," she observed. "This is significant in human culture. It's friendly, casual, we eat together to build bonds. Ethelians absorb nutrients through dermal patches. We don't have communal eating traditions." She studied the ration bar with interest. "But I understand the symbolic gesture. Thank you. You don't have to actually eat it if your digestive system can't." Zyphara took a deliberate bite, chewed thoughtfully, and swallowed. Her patterns cycled through several colors Sam couldn't interpret before settling on amused silver. It tastes like construction material. Yeah, that's accurate. They both laughed, her ears fluttering, his shoulders shaking, and Sam realized this was the first time he'd felt completely comfortable with another person in months. Not a colleague, not a research partner, but a friend. The walk back to the outpost took longer as they continued their conversation, trading observations about their respective species. Zyphara was fascinated by human facial expressions, the way eyebrows could convey dozens of meanings, how a smile could be genuine or false. Sam was equally fascinated by the complexity of her pattern language, how overlapping colors created nuanced meanings, how the speed of transitions mattered as much as the colors themselves. As the outpost came into view, its lights beginning to glow against the approaching dusk, Zyphara stopped. "Sam, I want to tell you something." Her patterns had gone deep purple, serious, important. "When I volunteered for this posting, I expected isolation. Humans and Ethelians have worked together before, but rarely closely. Usually, we misunderstand each other and maintain professional distance." Her ears swiveled to focus directly on him. "But you asked questions. You wanted to understand rather than just coexist. That's valuable to me." "It's valuable to me too," Sam said honestly. "I came here thinking I'd study plants. Instead, I'm learning an entirely new way of thinking about existence." Then we're both discovering things we didn't expect. That night in his quarters, Sam made notes not about xenobotany, but about xenopsychology, about how two species could bridge enormous gaps simply by choosing curiosity over assumption, about how beauty wasn't just in the eye of the beholder, but in the space between beings who chose to truly see each other. Outside his window, the auroras danced. Somewhere in her own quarters, Zyphara's patterns probably pulsed with whatever she felt about the day. And Sam realized that, for the first time since arriving on this remote outpost, he wasn't counting days until his tour ended. He was grateful for the time remaining. The seismic sensors began screaming at 300 local time. Sam jerked awake to red emergency lights, and the outpost's AI announcing in calm tones that were deeply at odds with the message. "Tectonic instability detected. Probability of significant seismic event, 94%. Evacuation protocols initiated." He found Zyphara already in the command center, her patterns cycling rapidly through colors he'd learned meant stress and focus, sharp yellows and bright reds. "How bad?" Sam asked, pulling up the geological surveys. "Bad." Her fingers moved across the holographic displays with practiced efficiency. "The crystalline formations we've been studying aren't just trees, they're root systems for much larger structures beneath the surface. Something is destabilizing them." The floor shuddered. That's standard protocol for remote outposts. What's the problem?" "The problem is the nearest rescue station is 6 days away. 6 days in a pod designed for minimal comfort. 6 days of being pressed into very close quarters with someone from another species." Her patterns flickered uncertain gray. "Ethelians have personal space requirements different from humans. Extended proximity without proper meditation space can cause psychological distress." Another tremor, stronger this time. Something in the storage section crashed. "Well," Sam said with a calm he absolutely didn't feel, "we can figure out the psychological distress after we survive the geological catastrophe." "Agreed." Zyphara's patterns flashed silver despite the situation. "Your humor timing is terrible. I've been told it's my best feature." They worked in synchronized chaos, Sam downloading research databases to portable drives, while Zyphara secured biological samples in stasis containers. The outpost groaned around them, its structural integrity compromised by tremors that were increasing in frequency and magnitude. "The crystalline forests," Zyphara said suddenly. "Sam, they're not being destroyed by the quakes. They're causing them." Sam pulled up the seismic data, overlaying it with their botanical surveys. She was right. The epicenters corresponded exactly with the largest crystalline formations. "They're growing," he realized. "Too fast." The root systems are literally fracturing the crust, which means this isn't a random geological event. It's biological expansion. Zafara's patterns had gone purple, her thinking color. This world is in a growth phase we didn't anticipate. We're not just observing it, we're in the way of it. The floor tilted sharply. Sam grabbed a console to steady himself while Zafara's flexible spine allowed her to adjust her balance with minimal effort. "Pod, now," Sam said. They made it to the emergency bay with seconds to spare. The evacuation pod was exactly as claustrophobic as Sam had feared, a cylinder barely large enough for 2 humans, which meant definitely not large enough for a human and an Ethelian who needed meditation space. But staying meant dying, so they squeezed inside. The pod launched automatically, using explosive charges to propel them away from the outpost and into a ballistic trajectory that would eventually intersect with the rescue station's patrol route. Through the small viewport, Sam watched the outpost, his home for 6 months, collapse as the ground beneath it literally tore apart. 3 months of research, he said quietly. The data is safe. The physical location was always temporary. Zafara had folded herself into a position that looked anatomically impossible, her spine curved in ways human vertebrae simply didn't allow. Her patterns were muted gray stress discomfort. "How bad is this for you?" Sam asked. "The close quarters." "Manageable for now." Her ears were flat against her head, distress signal. "Ask me again in 12 hours. The pod's life support hummed steadily. 6 days, 144 hours. Sam did the math and didn't like the answer. "Tell me about Ethelian meditation," he said. "What do you need that you're not getting?" "Space to exist without external observation. Your species doesn't understand. For Ethelians, being constantly visible is like having someone shouting in your ear continuously. We need periods of being unseen." Sam thought about this. The pod had minimal facilities, but it did have a privacy partition designed for basic hygiene. It wasn't much, but "What if we establish shifts?" he proposed. "You take the back section for 4 hours. I won't look, won't acknowledge your presence. Then we switch. Would that help?" Zafara's patterns flickered with uncertain hope. "You would do that?" "Zafara, we're going to be stuck in this tin can for a week. If we don't figure out how to coexist, we'll both go crazy." "Well, crazier. I'm already talking to someone who communicates through light patterns, so my baseline for crazy might need recalibration." Silver flickered through her patterns, amusement breaking through stress. "Your ability to joke during crisis is either adaptive psychology or mild insanity. Why not both?" They established a rhythm. 4 hours of shared space where they reviewed data, discussed their observations, or just talked about nothing important. Then 4 hours of private time where Sam focused intently on the forward viewport, while Zafara existed in her own space behind the partition. It worked, mostly. On the second day, during one of their shared periods, Zafara asked the question Sam had been dreading. "Do you have someone waiting for you on Earth, a partner?" "No, I'm married to my work, as the saying goes. You?" "Ethelians don't marry. We form constellation bonds, groups of individuals who align intellectually and emotionally. I'm part of a 7-person constellation, but we're not exclusive in the way human partnerships are." "That sounds complicated." "It's elegant. Multiple perspectives, distributed emotional support, reduced pressure on any single bond." Her patterns pulsed contemplative purple. "But it also means no single person truly knows all of you. There are aspects of myself I've shared with you in 3 months that my constellation hasn't seen in years." Sam considered this. "Is that good or bad?" "I don't know yet." On the 3rd day, Sam woke from restless sleep to find Zafara's patterns nearly dark, barely glowing at all. Alarm shot through him. "Zafara, what's wrong?" "Too much proximity," she said, voice strained. "My biology is shutting down non-essential functions. It's an automatic response to psychological stress." "What do you need?" "Space I cannot have. Distance that doesn't exist. Sam, her patterns flickered desperately. I don't know if I can manage 3 more days. Sam made a decision that was probably stupid but felt necessary. Close your eyes. What? Close them, trust me. Zyphara's patterns showed deep uncertainty, but she complied. Sam moved to the pod's minimal environmental controls and began adjusting lighting, temperature, even the air circulation patterns. Anything to change the sensory environment. Describe your home world to me, he said while he worked. Tell me about spaces there, places where you felt comfortable. Zyphara's voice was quiet but steady as she spoke of crystal caves, where Ethelians went for deep meditation, of bioluminescent oceans where one could float and let the water's natural rhythms replace personal pattern control, of mountain peaks where the thin atmosphere and intense starlight created a sense of vast emptiness. Sam listened and adjusted, trying to recreate even a fraction of those feelings in their confined space. He dimmed lights, altered airflow to create the sensation of open space, even used the pod's minor gravitational adjustments to reduce the feeling of pressure. Open your eyes, he said finally. Zyphara did. Her patterns were still muted, but they'd shifted from desperate gray to surprised pale blue. It's not the same, Sam said, but is it better? You tried to give me space by changing my perception of the space. Her ears swiveled forward, attention, appreciation. That's incredibly thoughtful, Sam. We're in this together, literally, physically in this together. If you're suffering, we need to fix it. On the 4th day, something shifted. Maybe it was proximity-induced bonding. Maybe it was the shared experience of survival. Maybe it was just that they'd run out of professional topics and had moved into genuinely personal territory. Can I ask you something potentially rude? Sam said during one of their shared periods. You've been staring at my body for months. I think we're past rudeness. Fair point. Sam gathered his courage. Do Ethelians feel attraction the way humans do? Physical, romantic, sexual attraction. Zyphara's patterns cycled through several colors before settling on honest gold. Yes and no. We feel connection, which encompasses elements of what you'd call all 3. But it's not separate categories for us. When an Ethelian bonds with another being, whether Ethelian or not, it's a holistic connection. Mind, emotion, physical presence, all inseparable. That sounds intense. It is, which is why we're careful about who we bond with. She was quiet for a moment. Sam, these past days, I'm feeling connection with you. Not romantic attraction as you define it, but something deeper. Your willingness to adapt to my needs, your curiosity about my existence, your genuine care for my well-being. This is the foundation of Ethelian bonding. Sam's heart was doing complicated things in his chest. I feel connected too, not in a romantic way, I don't think, but definitely in a you're important to me way. Then we have created something between our species that doesn't fit either of our existing frameworks. Her patterns pulsed with warm pink. That's rather special, isn't it? On the 5th day, disaster struck differently. A piece of micrometeorite debris, too small for the pod's shields to deflect, punctured the hull. Not catastrophically. The pod's self-sealing mechanisms engaged immediately, but the impact threw Sam against the bulkhead hard enough to break something. His leg, definitely his leg. The pain made everything go white at the edges. Zyphara was at his side instantly, her patterns flashing emergency red. Sam, the medical kit. Back panel, he managed through gritted teeth. Stabilizer and pain medication. She moved with efficiency he'd admire later when he wasn't busy trying not to scream. The stabilizer deployed, immobilizing his leg in a rigid frame. The medication began dulling the pain to something merely agonizing rather than completely unbearable. The rescue signal, Sam asked. Already boosted, but Sam, you need to stay still. Any movement could. I know, he tried to smile. Looks like I'm officially useless for our remaining time. You're not useless. Zyphara's patterns had gone fierce protective red with threads of worried yellow. You're injured and I'm going to care for you, and we're going to survive this together. The final 30 hours passed in a haze of pain medication and Zyphara's constant presence. She told him stories about Ethel, her home world, about constellation bonds and philosophical debates, about art forms that existed in 4 dimensions and music that was performed with bioluminescent patterns instead of sound. Sam, when coherent, told her about Earth, about coffee that was actually good, not synthesized, about ocean sunsets and mountain hiking and his nephew's 5th birthday party where everyone sang off-key. When the rescue ship finally docked with their pod, Sam was barely conscious. He remembered being moved to a proper medical bay, remembered Zyphara's patterns, pale blue with threads of gold, hovering at the edge of his vision, remembered her saying, "You saved me first, Sam Rivera. Your turn to be saved." And then darkness. Sam woke in a proper medical facility with a properly repaired leg and a properly terrible headache. The first thing he saw was Zyphara, sitting in a chair that had clearly been modified for Ethelian physiology, her patterns a soft blue that he'd learned meant calm relief. "You're conscious," she said, her ears perking forward. "Good." The medical staff were getting concerned. "How long?" 2 days since rescue. "Your leg required surgery." The break was more complicated than the pod's diagnostic suggested. But the prognosis is excellent. Full recovery expected within a month. Sam processed this. "And you, how are you handling being away from the close quarters?" "Better. The rescue ship has proper meditation spaces. I've spent approximately 15 hours being properly alone, which has helped significantly." Her patterns flickered silver. "Though I found myself missing our conversations. Is that strange?" "I don't think so. We spent 6 days in very intense proximity. We kind of speedrun the friendship process." "Speedrun?" Zyphara's ears tilted in confusion. "Human slang. Means we accomplish something very quickly that normally takes much longer." Sam tried to sit up, winced, and accepted that lying down was his life now. "What happens now? With the research, I mean. The outpost is gone. The data is secure. Preliminary analysis suggests our discovery about the crystalline forest's growth cycle is significant enough to warrant follow-up missions." Her patterns shifted to contemplative purple. "The xenobotany department is already planning return expeditions. They've requested that both of us be on the team, given our familiarity with the terrain and phenomena." Back to Kepler 442b. In approximately 1 year, after more thorough geological surveys ensure safety, Zyphara moved closer to his medical bed. "Sam, I've been thinking about what happened in the pod. About the bonding we discussed. Yeah, I need to tell you something that Ethelian protocols should have required me to disclose earlier." Her patterns went serious purple with threads of anxious orange. "When Ethelians form the kind of connection we've formed, there's a physiological component. My bioluminescent patterns begin to synchronize with the emotional patterns of the bonded individual. It's subtle at first, but over time it becomes more pronounced." Sam tried to understand the implications. "So you'll start reacting to my emotions?" "I already am." She held out her arm and her patterns shifted through a sequence. Worried yellow, grateful gold, amused silver, warm pink. "These are your emotional states over the past 10 minutes, reflected in my patterns. I'm reading you, Sam, whether either of us intends it." "That's invasive." "It can be. Which is why Ethelians are careful about who we bond with. Once established, the connection is permanent. I will always, to some degree, be aware of your emotional state when we're in proximity." Sam absorbed this. A permanent connection with someone he'd known for 6 months. With someone from a different species who saw the universe through completely different frameworks. "Are you asking my permission?" he said finally. "Or telling me this is already done?" "Both." Zyphara's pattern showed vulnerable pale blue. "The bond is formed. It cannot be undone. But I'm asking if you consent to continuing our association, knowing this connection exists." "Will you always know what I'm feeling?" "In broad strokes, yes. And Sam, there's something else. Her ears swiveled in that way that meant she was about to say something difficult. During the pod journey when you were injured and medicated, your emotional state became very clear to me. You care about me. Not romantically, as you said, but deeply. As a friend, a partner, someone important to your life. That caring it's the foundation of ethelian bonds. Sam felt his face heat despite the pain medication. I didn't mean to make things weird. You didn't, you made things clear. Zyphara's patterns went soft pink. Sam, I care about you too. In the ethelian sense, which encompasses friendship, respect, intellectual connection, and yes, a form of affection that doesn't translate perfectly to human terms. When I said we'd formed something that doesn't fit either of our frameworks, I meant it. We've created a new kind of connection. So what do we do with that? We honor it. We continue learning from each other. We acknowledge that two beings from different worlds can form bonds that transcend traditional categories. She paused, and we see where it leads. Sam reached out his hand, a human gesture of connection. Zyphara took it, her skin warm and carrying that slight bioluminescent pulse he'd learned to associate with her presence. I'd like that, he said. The doctors cleared Sam for light duty after a week. He was assigned to a research station in orbit around a nearby gas giant, boring spectroscopy work that let his leg heal properly. Zyphara was assigned to the same station, which the xenobiology department noted was a logical choice given their collaborative work history. Sam suspected Zyphara had requested it specifically, and she didn't deny it when he asked. They fell into a new rhythm. Work during standard hours, but evenings spent in the station's observation deck, watching the gas giant storms rage beneath them. They talked about everything and nothing. Sam taught Zyphara about human music. She was fascinated by how humans created emotional resonance through sound rather than light. Zyphara taught Sam the nuances of pattern language he'd been missing, the difference between 17 kinds of blue, each conveying subtly different meanings. One evening, 3 months after the pod rescue, Sam asked the question that had been bothering him. Are you happy, Zyphara, with this bond we've formed? Her patterns cycled through several colors before settling on honest gold. Happy is a simple word for a complex feeling, but yes, I am content with what exists between us. You see me, Sam, not as an exotic alien or a research subject or a curiosity. You see me as a person. That's rare in this galaxy. You see me too, not as clumsy or limited or inferior. Just as different, which you find interesting rather than problematic. We are quite the pair, aren't we? Her ears fluttered with amusement. A human who stares too much and an ethelian who asks uncomfortable questions. We should get t-shirts made. Ethelians don't wear clothing for decoration. That was a joke, Zyphara. I know, her patterns sparkled silver. I'm learning your humor. Sometimes I even find it funny. 6 months later, they were cleared to return to Kepler 442b with a new expedition team. The planet had stabilized. The crystalline forest's growth spurt had completed, creating entirely new geological formations that would take decades to properly study. Standing on the surface again, watching the singing valleys stretch toward triple-mooned horizons, Sam felt Zyphara's presence beside him. Her patterns had gone soft blue with threads of gold, contentment and connection. It's strange being back, she said. Everything is the same but different. We're different too, Sam observed. We came here as colleagues, we're leaving as, what exactly? Friends, Zyphara said immediately. Then, after a pause, but friends in a way that neither of our species has quite defined yet. We're writing a new category, Sam Rivera. I can live with that. They worked together for another 3 months, cataloging the changes, collecting data, marveling at how a world could transform. And at night, in their separate quarters, because Zyphara still needed meditation space and Sam still needed his bad coffee, they would send each other messages across the local network. Simple things, observations about the day, jokes about their colleagues, questions about each other's cultures. Nothing profound, but everything meaningful. On their final night before leaving Kepler 442b for reassignment to separate projects, they stood together in the valley where Sam had first realized he was staring too obviously. "I brought you something," Sam said, pulling out a small container. "It's probably stupid, but—" Inside was a carefully preserved bioluminescent cell from one of the crystalline trees. It pulsed with gentle blue light, preserved in stasis. "So you remember this place," he explained, "and our work here," and he trailed off, uncertain how to articulate what he meant. "And the beginning of understanding," Zyphara finished. Her patterns had gone pink. That deep emotional warmth he'd learned meant something important to her. She produced her own gift, a small crystal that contained a recording of her pattern sequences from their time together. "So you can remember what I look like when I'm happy," she said, "and angry and curious and all the other things we've shared." They stood together as the crystalline valleys sang their evening song, two beings from different worlds who had learned to see each other. "We'll work together again," Sam said, not a question, a statement. "We will," Zyphara agreed. "The bond ensures it. I'll always know where you are emotionally speaking, and you'll always know me." That's kind of beautiful and kind of terrifying. Most meaningful things are. Her ears swiveled to focus on him. "Sam, thank you for that day you asked if you could observe me. For turning what could have been awkward into something profound. Thank you for not being offended,